Hi, students, colleagues, and anyone else who's tuned in today. My name is Professor Roy Wogelius. I'm the Professor of Geochemistry at the University of Manchester. And this will be a short video to explain some of the facts, give you some insight into the upcoming industrial action or strike that the university academics are about to hold across the entire United Kingdom. So first, what I want to do is give some information and some local knowledge about here in Manchester. Then there's a couple of presentations, one done by one of my colleagues, and then a few shorter graphics that I put together myself to go into a little bit more depth of what's going on. But first, let's just get some of the basic facts. So I'm going to do this in sort of newspaper reporter style. First of all, who? Well, it's the University and College Union that I'm a member of. The acronym is UCU. This is a group of academics and support staff who work together as a collective in order to improve our working conditions here in British universities. The other groups that you should know about, the other dramatis personae, are, first of all, UUK, which is Universities UK. That's a group of the vice-chancellors or the big bosses of British academia. Then there's a bit more alphabet soup. There's a group called UCEA, which is UCEA, and that is the Universities and Colleges Employers Association. That's the group that negotiates with our union on pay. Now, just to complete the whole scene, there's a group called USS, and those are the people who are responsible for our pensions. That's the university's superannuation scheme. So those are the main players, and the dispute is between UCU and UUK, our employers. But of course, the people who negotiate with us on pay and the people who have control of our pensions are also important players in this drama. What is going on? All right, so there's a pay and pensions and working conditions dispute, and this has been boiling over for several years. Each time we try to make progress, the employers come back with unacceptable offers and then refuse to negotiate with us, which is the situation we're in right now. So the strike is our last-ditch attempt to get the employers to listen and to negotiate fairly. None of us want to be on strike. It's the last thing that we want to do, but we are left with no alternative. This is the only thing we can do to bring them back to the table. Where is the strike going on? Well, things are so bad. Academics in this sector are so angry that every university in the UK is going to be participating in this strike. Everybody. That's about 70,000 people. When are the strikes? So they're planned for Thursday and Friday, November 24th and 25th, and then a final follow-up day on the following Wednesday, November 30th. How does the strike function? Well, in the first instance, it will involve picket lines. So there'll be lines of people representing the union in front of every academic building in the United Kingdom on the 24th, the 25th, and the 30th. And the whole point of that is to show our bosses that no teaching will get done without our work. We're absolutely vital so they can make their profits, and they need to be reminded of that. So why? Just a little bit now. I'll talk a bit more about this when I use some graphics, but I wanted to make the first 5 minutes of this video relatively concise, and so you can break out at any point in the video, having gotten the key points to start out with. So why? Why are we striking? Well, first of all, we're striking over our pensions. This is the funds, this is deferred income that all of us will rely on when we get older. Our pensions have been slashed. They've been attacked for absolutely no sound economic reason, such that the situation we're in right now, our young lecturers will have a pension that's worth only about 40% of what the pension that your school teacher will look forward to. 40%. It's just outrageous. It's not right. How about our pay? All right, that's the second one. Over 12 years, the past 12 years, our pay rises have been much smaller than the rate of inflation. And this year, the pay offer is the absolute worst off compared to inflation. So if we accept the current offer that's on the table, that would mean that young lecturers just employed will be working for free at least 3 days per month compared to someone that we hired 10 years ago. This is totally unfair, and it exploits young people most directly. And there's another thing to say about pay and pensions, because the pay and pensions injustices impact women and minorities and the disabled the most, because they already suffer pay gaps in the system. So these management policies make those gaps worse. We should be addressing those pay gaps and not entrenching them, but they will not listen to that. And then finally, there's our working conditions. The working conditions are your learning conditions. And so our working conditions affect you the most directly. Academics and our support staff are not happy. We've lost confidence in our bosses. And this means that between 75 and 80% of people working in higher education are thinking about leaving. That's a pretty strong indictment of the way that we're being so-called managed. Now, as it becomes more difficult to hire people and as people leave, our already heavy workloads will get worse. And that means your learning conditions will just continue to degrade, continue to get worse. So what that means is we're on a path where the lives of all future students and all future staff are on a direct trajectory to get worse. I personally can't stand by and watch British academia ruined by corporate greed. And I would ask you to join us. Make your voice heard in any of the ways that you feel willing to make your voice heard in support of your academic and academic support staff. And I'll talk a little bit more about ways that you can support us in a minute. That's the first part of the video. Thank you for listening. Those are the key points. Now I'm going to get into a little bit more detail for those of you who want to learn a bit more. Okay, so now I want to get into a little bit more details about the strike. And in order to do that, I'm going to use a presentation put together by one of my colleagues. So let me just share my screen here. This is Laura Loyola. She's one of our colleagues, and she's put together this very, very interesting and insightful and relatively lighthearted slideshow. So let's go to that. Now, the fights about pay and working conditions are called the four fights in union parlance. So UCU, that's the University and College Union. And then our pensions fight. And they're bundled together because we don't want to leave young people behind. We want to keep these two disputes together. One, of course, affects the older people most directly, and the other one, of course, affects younger people more directly. So we're keeping that bundle together. They can't divide and conquer us. So this explains what a union is. As I said, it's where we work together in a collective to try and make our working conditions better. And UCU is the University and College Union. I'm a member of that, and many people who teach you, in fact, the bulk of the academics in my department are UCU members. So what happens during the strike? We withhold our work, and that means we don't get paid when we're on strike. We will hold the picket line, and we will stand outside the workplace to demonstrate to our management that no work gets done without us doing the work. And it also allows us to explain to others what the issues are so we can build up some support. Why are we striking? We're striking because of inequality. We're striking because of casualization of our employees. 68% of research staff in the UK are on casualized contracts. That means they don't have any permanence. And we have a terrible, terrible, well below inflation pay offer right now. So that impacts all of us. There's huge pay gaps. Casualization is rife. The current pay rise is well below inflation, and we're at breaking point. As I said in the previous part of the video, many staff are thinking of leaving, and the vast majority of staff need mental health support because our workloads have gotten so high of late. So what do we want? It's nothing outrageous. It's totally reasonable. We want equal pay for everybody. We want to close the pay gap, not make it worse. We want to get rid of precarious employment. Some universities have already done this. For example, the Open University, in large part because of action by the UCU, has ended casual employment. It's possible. We want to get our workloads back on a manual track, and we want our pay to be fair. And I'll show you a little bit later how completely unfair the pay offer is. The pensions dispute has been rumbling on for well over a decade, and it's a constant attack on our deferred income, which is the money that we'll get paid after we retire. Right now, because of some tremendously questionable shenanigans, they turned around and cut our guaranteed pension by 35%, just like that, in the middle of the pandemic. And that's been going on for the last year. And this is one of the reasons why people are so upset, because we used to have a really good pension scheme, and now it's worse than just about every sector in the country. It's bad. It's really bad. So we want to save our pensions. We pay part of our salary to make a pension. That gets invested, and then when we retire, we get an income to live off. And it's the shenanigans that have been going on with the control of this deferred income that have really upset many of my colleagues, and myself included. I'm more upset on their behalf than on my own, because I'm retiring relatively soon. So I could just walk away from this, but I can't do that in good conscience. I have to help and work to make sure that the retirement benefits for my colleagues when they retire are as good as mine. It's obvious. There's a huge amount of money that goes in. And right now, what's being done, it means that when all of your university lecturers retire in the future, they're going to struggle. We right now, first thing we want are these massive cuts to be gotten rid of. And we want to make sure that our pensions are put back on a solid footing. There's plenty of money in the scheme. There is absolutely no excuse for what US has done to us. None whatsoever. What can you do? You can show your support, and there's a range of different ways you can do this. You can make your voice heard. You can send an email to your vice chancellor. You can send an email to the people who you know are in management positions. You can talk to your lecturers and talk to the people who run the university. Talk to your parents about this and let us know that you support us. The student union already supports us. We will be doing teach outs during strike days. You can look for information about that from the union. And if you feel that you are able to honor the picket line, we would very strongly ask you to not cross the picket line, if at all possible. And I'm going to make a personal comment here. Of course, students are worried about, well, what happens if I don't get the content in on a lecture day or a practical day? For my courses, there will be no penalty. If you miss something and it turns up on an assessment, then it doesn't count in that assessment. And I would certainly hope that that would be the case for all of my colleagues, that we make a pact to not penalize students. If you don't feel that you can trust the lecturer who's delivering the content to agree to that, then by all means, you need to go to class. And we won't think any the less of you. We've all been students. We all know what it's like to feel the pressure of being a student. But if that's the case, you could always just ask your lecturer why they're not honoring the picket line. Might be a good, especially those of you who are in economics or business, might be a good question to ask. So those are the strike days. Don't forget to make your voices heard. Now, that's the end of Laura's fantastic little presentation. So again, I'm going to stop there, and then there'll be a final part to this video. So if you feel like you've learned enough, that's absolutely fine. I'm going to go into a little bit more depth with some graphics that I prepared if you're interested to just learn even a little bit more. Okay, so this is the third part of my video about the upcoming UCU industrial action. And if you're still with me, thank you for that. I expect there's a good chance you're one of my students or one of my colleagues if you're still here. If not, then maybe what I've had to say so far you found really, really interesting and you're just sticking in to hear the end of it. Now, I've done a lot of research on this personally. I've looked into this and I'm going to give you just a few more brief statistics from a PowerPoint presentation that I put together to explain exactly why I find what's going on to be so outrageous. So let's just go back to screen sharing again. So this is the state of play. This is what the ballot looked like. It was very, very strong. In the Department of Earth and Environmental Sciences here at Manchester, we had a 71% ballot return. And I can't give you the numbers exactly because they're confidential, but we had an overwhelming yes vote. It's up in the very, very high percentages. So people locally in the department are extremely unhappy, and it's the bulk of the people who teach in this department. Nationwide, a similar story. The ballot return is a little bit lower than what we had within these. This is one of the highest returns in the university, in fact. But of those people who return their ballots, the vast majority are really unhappy with the way things are going. So nationwide, the academics who deliver all of the teaching and research and the support staff who deliver the administration are not happy with the direction that things are going. They're not happy with their pay. They're not happy with their working conditions, and they're not happy with what's been done to their pensions. That is clear. It's a clear message that this ballot presents. Why? Why are we so unhappy? Well, let's take a dive into the numbers. For the last 12 years, the people who run our pensions on behalf of the employers, they're supposed to be running it on behalf of the staff, but they don't, have been trying and trying and trying to degrade, and then finally completely throw our pension scheme away. Now, they tried to do that. They tried to completely get rid of our pension scheme once. Our strike worked and it kept our pension, not perfect, but it made it possible to salvage our pension for the future. But ever since that victory of our strike several years ago, USS has constantly carried on pushing and pushing and pushing in an attempt to degrade our pensions. And I think what they would really like to do is just end the pension scheme completely and force us all onto private individual pension schemes for reasons that I'm not going to go into now, but reasons that, well, actually, maybe I will. It's because the people who regulate us come from the insurance industry, and basically what they want to do is effectively privatize everything and force us all into privatized pension schemes. And it's for their own personal benefit, actually, and for their mates. This has nothing to do with financial prudence. It's just an attack on an extremely well-funded and an extremely successful pension fund. And this is what they've been trying to do all this time, constantly predicting valuations of our pension scheme that are well below the way it actually functions. This is the real line here in black. Every one of these assumptions is fictitious. It has nothing to do with the way our pension fund has grown. Now, to make matters worse, in the very depths of the COVID pandemic, they revalued our assets. And they said, oh my gosh, there's a big black hole in the value of your pension scheme. Well, it wasn't. There was a big crash, right? There was a huge economic contraction. But they revalued our pensions there at that time. And they said, oh, look at that. Oh, your pensions are in this enormous deficit. We have to start cutting your benefits and we have to start raising the amount that you pay. And at the time, the union said, no, that's wrong. It's not fair and it's not right and it's not what you should be doing. It's not prudent at all. It's an attack. And indeed, what they also did is they said, oh yeah, and the way things are going to grow in the future is basically investments are going to lose money. Well, that's not the way that financial markets work. This red line is basically the end of capitalism. You wouldn't get this unless, well, you need to have major market failings. And if that happened, then our pension schemes would be the least of our worries. So it was completely fictive. And what they've done to our pension scheme was completely fictive. And in fact, that's back several months ago. They devalued our pensions and attacked our pensions. And in fact, because they said we were in deficit, means the University of Manchester has to pay £6 million per year to USS in deficit maintenance payments. Now, that's nearly the combined tuition over 3 years of nearly all the undergraduates in my department, just completely thrown away because they will not come to the table and negotiate our pensions. I think in a fair and just society, that would be criminal. But for some reason, they think they can get away with this. But the union is not going to let them get away with this. This is where our valuation is right now. But USS and UK will not revalue our pensions. They just continue and continue and continue to try to trash our pension scheme. And it's wrong. Just in a word, it's wrong. And I won't sit still while this is going on. I really won't. I can't. It's just so wrong. It's ridiculous. All right. Anyway, so should I use the word wrong again? But what else is going on? How about pay? Let's look at this. Want a little bit more of a dose of wrongness? This is how Vice Chancellor's pay has risen over the last 12 years. And this is how the average pay of a lecturer in our sector has worked over the last similar 12 years. I think you can see what's going on. Every year, the pay offer is smaller and smaller and smaller than inflation until right now, it's totally ridiculous. It's way, way below inflation. This is indexed relative to the consumer price index. It'd be worse if I went to RPI. And this is how the vice chancellors pay themselves. Oh, incidentally, let's just go back here for a minute. And so the guy who's in charge of all this nonsense is a guy named Bill Galvin, who, at a time when our pensions were being slashed, at a time when our fund was being mismanaged, paid himself £100,000 bonus for how brilliantly he was managing our fund. Yeah. Now, this is the guy who's behind this whole liability-driven investment scam that's been running rife through the rest of the pension industry. He started that when he worked at the pensions regulator, the government oversight body. And that LDI is what almost completely capsized the rest of the UK pensions industry after the mini budget. So Bill Galvin has resigned from USS I would say, in disgrace. But it's that kind of attitude that's led us to this point. It's not fiscal prudence. It's not economic sense. It's completely ridiculous. And if you don't believe me, you can read what the Financial Times has had to say about this, because they agree with what I've said to you completely. And that's not, a Marxist rag. That is a very conservative newspaper that's done an analysis and agrees with the union 100%. And this isn't just me saying this. There are experts on the right wing of the political divide who agree that this is total nonsense. All right. Anyway, back to pay. So this is what the vice chancellors have been paying themselves. Whoa, that's pretty good. That says to me that there's a sector with money in it. Yeah. Well, it is a sector with money in it. The number of students has increased. The amount of money coming into the system through tuition has increased. Right now, per year, there's about a £2 billion operating surplus in the academic industry in the United Kingdom. There's billions. It's probably more than that's a year-old estimate. Right, there's more than 44 billion in cash reserves. Yet when we come to the negotiating table to talk about pay, there's no money. But when it's time to ramp up the pay of the vice chancellors and the 20 or so high-level managers, well, that's a different thing. Then there's plenty of money in the system. And right now, they will not negotiate, despite the fact that we have one of the worst inflation impacts in the last 20 years, no, nothing. They will not come to the table. And for reasons that I explained before, this is not good for anybody in the academic sector, but it's really, really bad for those people who are already disadvantaged in terms of their pay and their working conditions. And how about working conditions and governance? Let's go to that. So this has the direct impact on the student experience. Let's look at this. This is the last student survey that the University of Manchester made public. The direction of travel in terms of the answers to these questions is quite clear. It parallels exactly what's been happening with our pay and conditions. The SLT stands for Senior Leadership Team. Does it have a clear vision? No. Do people feel they have job security? No. Do our leaders lead us well? No. Is change managed well? No. It's been going down and down and down. Now, mysteriously, in May of 2022, after the pandemic, they did a staff survey, but there was a technical difficulty. And so all that information has not been released. And they did another one, another staff survey, which was completed last month. That's not been made public. I wonder why that is. You think it could be because they're not really interested in what people think? Does the senior leadership team listen? No, not at all. Not in any of our experiences. Our working conditions have gotten worse, and it's reflected in our working conditions have gotten worse, and that's reflected in your learning conditions. And this is why those percentages of people thinking about leaving the sector are so high. It's because we've lost faith in those people who are supposed to lead us. They don't manage us, and they certainly don't lead us. And so 81% of young people in the sector are thinking of leaving higher education. Now, that's a terrible indictment of management. Absolutely terrible. So that's it. Those are all the things that I wanted to say to you. But that's why I feel so strongly about what's going on here. I can't stand by and leave a sector. So I'll be retiring next year. I think this is an outstanding academic endeavor. I think British academia punches way above its weight, and it does so because of the people who work in it, not because of managers. And I can't see their futures ruined. And I don't want to see the future of British academia ruined. I have 2 children who I hope will go through the British academic system, and hopefully I'll have grandchildren. And I would like them to have a system that is focused on academic values rather than corporate profits. I would like them to have the possibility of a future that doesn't only worry about money, but that actually thinks about the people who work in the sector, the people who learn in the sector, and try and make this experience as positive as it can be, because that has benefits for all of society, not just for a few people at the top who make huge amounts of money off of everybody else's work. That's what I think. So thanks a lot for listening. I hope that explains to you what's going on here. Maybe the last way to leave it is just that the pay and the pensions are a symptom of a much, much bigger problem. But if you can support us, I'd really appreciate that. And thanks again for listening. Good luck to you all.